The year is 2007. Peyton Manning had just won his long-awaited first Super Bowl title and silenced millions of critics in the process. But coming back with a vengeance was the dragon it took him years to slay. After falling short in back-to-back seasons, the Patriots spent the offseason building a football super team. They traded for an underachieving, distressed asset in Oakland's Randy Moss, added Wes Welker and Dante Stallworth, and all of a sudden, Tom Brady had the most dangerous group of weapons of his career. Never having thrown more than 28 touchdowns in a season, it was time to see what number 12 was really capable of with this kind of talent at his disposal. Meanwhile, the San Diego Chargers were coming off a 14-2 season, but after another playoff disappointment, head coach Marty Schottenheimer was shockingly fired and replaced by Norv Turner. Still, with the league's reigning MVP in LaDainian Tomlinson and Phillip Rivers continuing to develop, expectations in San Diego remained sky high. But the Super Bowl runner-up Chicago Bears were set to defend the NFC with one of football's best defenses and the explosive returnability of Devin Hester. The Saints were coming off an emotional run to the NFC Championship thanks to the ascent of Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And in Dallas, optimism was in the air after Tony Romo exploded onto the scene in 06, giving the Cowboys hope that they'd found their first franchise QB since Troy Aikman. But in New York, Tom Coughlin's job security was constantly questioned after another disappointing finish. And with tensions reportedly building inside the locker room, the Giants looked far closer to a teardown than contention. And after flirting with retirement for years, Brett Favre returned to the Packers yet again. After an 8-8 season in which he threw as many interceptions as touchdowns, many believe the 38-year-old's best days were behind him. But Favre still had one of the league's strongest arms, with maybe just enough magic left in it to make things interesting. And the 07 draft brought a massive wave of future superstars into the league. Jamarcus Russell first overall, and then a handful of legends in the next 14 picks, including Georgia Tech wide receiver Calvin Johnson and Oklahoma back Adrian Peterson, whose rare combination of speed and violence made him one of the most hyped running back prospects in years. From the very beginning of the 07 season, it was obvious something had changed. In Week 1, Brady and the Pats opened the year by humiliating the Jets 38-14 with their unstoppable new-look offense. Brady and Randy Moss connected for a touchdown in Moss's very first game with the team, while Wes Welker fit seamlessly underneath. And as if their dominance wasn't enough, controversy followed. During Week 1, the Patriots were caught illegally videotaping Jets' defensive signals from the sideline, igniting the Spygate scandal. Belichick was fined $500K, and New England forfeited a first-round pick, turning an already hated powerhouse into the league's ultimate villain. But that only put a chip on their shoulder that they really didn't need. 38 more points again in Weeks 2 and 3 as they began their rampage through the NFL. Then in Week 4 facing Cincinnati, the Pats turned one of the league's top offenses into spectators. Brady threw 3 more touchdowns in a 34-13 win, giving him 13 touchdown passes through 4 games, and Moss already had 7 himself. But while New England became the story of the league, the Cowboys looked every bit like the NFC equivalent. Tony Romo opened the season playing the best football of his young career, building chemistry with Terrell Owens. Dallas stormed out to a 4-0 start, highlighted by a 45-35 Week 1 win over the Giants, and then 3 more games of at least 34 points. The Cowboys were the NFC favorite. But most people expected the Packers to spend 2007 transitioning toward the future. Instead, Green Bay was 4-0 after impressive victories over the Giants and Chargers, while Favre played with the energy and confidence of a quarterback 10 years younger. But the Colts were also 4-0, making sure no one forgot about the defending champs. However, the Bears, fresh off their Super Bowl appearance, collapsed immediately. Rex Grossman was benched for Brian Griese after throwing 1 touchdown to 7 picks in his first 3 weeks, and Chicago was 1-3. And after the Saints' magical 2006 run, they too crashed back to earth with an 0-4 start. Not only was their defense giving up 30 or 40 points on the regular, but the 5th-ranked offense from 2006 failed to crack even 15 points in any of their first 4 games. However, a new superstar in Minnesota was taking the league by storm. Through the first month of his rookie season, Adrian Peterson had already posted 3 100-yard rushing performances. In an extremely chaotic Monday night game against Buffalo in Week 5, Tony Romo played the worst game of his career, throwing 5 interceptions and losing a fumble. Yet somehow, he led a frantic last-minute touchdown drive. Dallas recovered an onside kick, and rookie kicker Nick Folk drilled a 53-yard game winner as time expired to preserve their undefeated start. But every week became another showcase for Tom Brady and the most unstoppable offense the league had ever seen. They hung 34 on Cleveland before a possible Super Bowl preview in Week 6, when they traveled to Dallas to face the Cowboys. But Tom Brady went ballistic, throwing 5 touchdowns in a 48-27 win that made it clear the Patriots were simply in a tier of their own. They then concluded October by obliterating Miami and Washington by a combined score of 101-25. But their biggest test of the season on paper would be coming in the first week of November, when they were set to face the Colts, who were now 7-0 after beating the Panthers 31-7. The Titans put together a strong October, going 3-1, highlighted by a 38-36 shootout win in Week 7 against Houston, where Rob Baronis drilled a game winner as time expired. At 5-2, Tennessee was second in the AFC South. And quietly, the Giants were becoming one of the hottest teams in football. After their 0-2 start, New York ripped off a stretch of 6 straight wins that included 30-point showings against the Jets, Falcons, and 49ers. Meanwhile, the Steelers were becoming one of the top teams under first-year head coach Mike Tomlin. Sitting at 5-2, their October was headlined by a 21-0 shutout of the Seahawks, who, despite the loss, still led the weak NFC West at 4-3 with veterans like Matt Hasselbeck, Sean Alexander, and Julian Peterson. But the Browns surprisingly had an elite offense, led by Derek Anderson and Braylon Edwards. They put up 51 points against Cincinnati in Week 2, as well as 41 against Miami in Week 6. And the Saints recovered from their awful start with 4 straight wins to climb back into contention. But the most unforgettable single-game performance of the season belonged to a rookie. Adrian Peterson had already torched the Bears for 224 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 5. But in Week 9 against San Diego, he showed LaDainian Tomlinson that his days as the NFL's consensus top back were numbered. The Vikings rookie exploded for an NFL record 296 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, breaking off scores of 46 and 64 yards. He would miss the final 2 weeks of the month with a knee injury, but through his first 8 healthy games, Peterson was on pace for over 2,200 yards rushing, 6.6 yards per carry, and earning Jim Brown comparisons. This video is sponsored by Courtyard.io. It's kind of depressing how exciting shopping used to be as a kid. Opening packs of sports cards was one of my favorite things to do, and online shopping as an adult in 2026 just doesn't hit the same way. But the good news is shopping just got fun. Courtyard is basically turning collectibles into a game. You can open packs online, hit huge chase cards, instantly trade them, vault them, or sell them back immediately if you don't want them. But make no mistake, these are real collectibles. Real graded cards that are stored in Courtyard's insured, temperature-controlled vault, digitized so you can instantly trade worldwide without dealing with shipping, scams, or fakes. And if you do ever want the actual card shipped to your house, you can redeem it at any time. Plus, they show real-time odds up front. Packs are priced at expected value, and you can sell every pack back instantly with Courtyard's guaranteed buyback offer. No seller fees, no buyer fees, free shipping, and free vaulting. Courtyard is pioneering the next generation of commerce through gamified shopping. It brings back that childhood feeling of ripping packs with your friends. Except now it combines the best of both worlds, instant and global. Check out Courtyard.io and start ripping. The undefeated Colts hosted New England in perhaps the most anticipated regular season game in NFL history. Brady versus Manning, 8-0 versus 7-0, the 2 defining quarterbacks of the era, meeting with the entire football world watching. If there was ever a Super Bowl in November, this was it. The Patriots had been outscoring opponents 41-16 on average to this point, but on this night, the Colts appeared ready to hand New England their first loss. Randy Moss found the end zone in the second quarter, but a 73-yard Joseph Adai reception and a Peyton Manning rush put Indianapolis up 20-10 in the fourth quarter. But Brady answered with 2 late touchdown drives of his own. finding Welker to cut the deficit to 3, then Kevin Falk for the go-ahead score with roughly 3 minutes left. Manning got one final chance, but New England strip-sacked him to clinch the 24-20 victory that was bigger than any regular season win, maybe ever. They proceeded to beat the Bills 56-10, and then the Eagles. So 11-0 with their biggest threats already out of the way, 16-0 was now within reach. But things got even worse for Indianapolis the very next week. On Sunday night in San Diego, Peyton Manning threw a career-high 6 interceptions in a 23-21 loss to the Chargers. After being positioned as the Patriots' biggest threat, the Colts had dropped 2 in a row. In the NFC, though, the Cowboys continued to play like the conference's best team. And in Week 13, they hosted another powerhouse in the Packers. The game carried major playoff implications and was another potential conference championship preview. But Brett Favre suffered an injury in the second quarter, and even though Aaron Rodgers entered the game and threw a touchdown, 4 Tony Romo TDs and 156 yards from T.O. strengthened the Cowboys' grip on the NFC. Fortunately, Favre would slot right back into the lineup the following game. After an ugly 1-3 start, the Chargers were now 6-5, leading the AFC West. And the Jags were on the rise as well, going 3-1 in November behind solid play from David Garrard and the two-headed rushing attack of Fred Taylor and Maurice Jones-Drew, climbing to 8-3. But tragically, on November 27th, Redskins safety Sean Taylor was killed after being shot during a home invasion. One of the league's greatest young defenders gone at just 24 years old. In Week 13 against the Ravens, New England came terrifyingly close to losing. Baltimore's physical defensive performance frustrated Tom Brady and rattled the Patriots' offense. But multiple late penalties and controversial moments kept New England alive before Brady finally hit Jabbar Gaffney for the game-winning touchdown in the final minute to escape with a 27-24 win. For a moment, it looked like the perfect season might end right there. Instead, Brady and Moss continued their journey toward rewriting the record books, and waiting for them at the very end were the New York Giants. In Week 17, New England traveled to the Meadowlands, garnering more intrigue for individual records rather than debate about who would actually win the game. Tom Brady had 48 touchdowns, one shy of Peyton Manning's 49 from 2004, while Randy Moss had 21 receiving touchdowns, also one shy of Jerry Rice's 22 from 1987. Instead, it became one of the best games of the entire year. A 4-yard Moss touchdown in the second quarter tied the two records, but the 10-5 Giants would give the Patriots all they could handle for the next couple quarters. Plaxico Burress scored with 9 minutes left in the third to go up 28-16, but with their backs against the wall, the no-doubt MVP executed an efficient 73-yard drive, capped off by a Lawrence Maroney touchdown. And with 11 minutes left in the fourth and time running out for records to be shattered, Randy Moss broke wide open deep down the right sideline, and Brady dropped a perfect pass right into his hands for his 50th touchdown and Moss's 23rd to snatch both records while going up 31-28 on the Giants. 11 minutes to go and the perfect regular season was theirs. Another Maroney touchdown made it a 2-score game, and despite Burress's second score of the day with 1 minute left, New England ultimately survived 38-35, completing the first 16-0 regular season in NFL history. And certainly not to be overlooked during this season was Wes Welker, an undrafted receiver out of Texas Tech who became a special teams ace and reliable slot receiver in Miami, but never cracked 700 receiving yards in the first 3 years of his career. Yet in year 1 in New England, he finished 4th in Offensive Player of the Year voting with a league-leading 112 catches, 1,200 yards, and 8 touchdowns. But the biggest takeaway for fans after Week 17 was that the Patriots looked beatable. And the Giants were clearly the most dangerous wildcard team in football, despite being statistically middle of the pack on both offense and defense. The Buccaneers took the NFC South at 9-7 with their aging defensive core, but this was the last time John Gruden made the playoffs. Elsewhere, the Cowboys locked up the NFC's #1 seed at 13-3 as Tony Romo threw 36 touchdowns and T.O. caught 15 of them. But Owens having to nurse a torn finger tendon and a high ankle sprain was cause for concern heading into January. The Colts and Packers both finished 13-3 as well, Legendary Colts DB Bob Sanders was the Defensive Player of the Year, and what began as a plausible farewell tour for Brett Favre transformed into one of the best comeback seasons ever by an aging QB. In 07, he broke Dan Marino's records for most QB wins, touchdown passes, yards, and completions. But the AFC South in 2007 was really one of the more remarkable divisions of the 2000s, because the Jaguars finished in second place at 11-5, while the Titans also grabbed a wild card at 10-6, ending the season on a 3-game win streak. The Steelers captured the AFC North at 10-6 with the league's second-ranked defense, and somehow the 10-6 Browns missed the playoffs, becoming one of the best teams, at least on paper, to ever do so. The Seahawks won the NFC West, but even though the Niners came in third place at 5-11, they did lay claim to Rookie of the Year linebacker Patrick Willis, who was a first-team All-Pro while leading the league with 174 combined tackles. And at the very bottom of the league, the Dolphins narrowly eluded infamy. After opening 0-13, Miami finally earned their first win of the season in Week 15, when Cleo Lemon connected with Greg Camarillo for a 64-yard touchdown in overtime against Baltimore, avoiding what would have been the NFL's first ever 0-16 season. The Chargers won the AFC West comfortably at 11-5, as LT won his second consecutive rushing title in what was the final year of his prime. But Adrian Peterson finished off one of the greatest rookie seasons ever, with over 1,300 rushing yards in 14 games, though the Vikings missed the postseason, losing out on the second wildcard spot to the Redskins, who admirably bounced back from their November tragedy with 4 straight wins over the Bears, Giants, Vikings, and Cowboys to secure a playoff berth at 9-7. The Redskins looked dead for 3 quarters, down 13-0, before roaring back with 2 early fourth-quarter touchdowns to briefly take the lead, only for the Seahawks to intercept Todd Collins twice in the final 6 minutes and return both for touchdowns in a 35-14 win. Next, Maurice Jones-Drew and Fred Taylor ran the Jaguars to a 28-10 lead over the Steelers, but 3 straight Pittsburgh touchdowns would give them a 29-28 lead with 6 minutes left. However, after a 32-yard fourth down David Garrard scramble, Josh Scobie kicked the 25-yard game winner to steal the 31-29 victory at Heinz Field. Sunday afternoon, the Bucs struck first at home with a 1-yard Ernest Graham run, but 2 Brandon Jacobs touchdowns put New York up 7 going into halftime. With 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, an Amani Toomer score all but put the game away for the Giants, 24-14. And finally, for the worst game of the weekend, the Titans led the Chargers 6-0 after the second quarter. But in the second half, Rivers and LT broke through as San Diego scored 17 unanswered points, and their defense slammed the door 17-6. The Seahawks stunned the Lambeau crowd early, capitalizing on 2 quick fumbles from Ryan Grant to go up 14-0 just 4 minutes into the game. But as snow poured down in Green Bay, Grant completely redeemed himself with 201 yards and 3 touchdowns as the Packers scored touchdowns on 6 straight drives to roll to a 42-20 victory. Next, the Jags traded punches with the Patriots, heading to the locker room tied at 14, but 2 Brady touchdown passes on their first 2 drives out of half, and a Rodney Harrison pick with 4 minutes left sealed New England's 31-20 victory to move to 17-0. And in the last playoff game ever played at the RCA Dome, the Colts and Chargers went back and forth with explosive plays all afternoon, despite turnovers from each. But even after losing both Phillip Rivers and LT to injury, San Diego mustered one last drive and left with a dramatic 28-24 upset. Then, after losing twice to Dallas during the regular season, the Giants went into Texas Stadium against the top seed and hit them in the mouth with a 46-second touchdown drive to end the first half. After an early fourth quarter Brandon Jacobs touchdown, the Cowboys had 3 separate drives to win the game. But with seconds remaining, a Tony Romo pass down the middle intended for Terry Glenn was intercepted by R.W. McQuarters to preserve the 21-17 upset. Even with Tom Brady throwing 3 interceptions, the Patriots were still in the driver's seat most of the AFC Championship against the battered Chargers, who were without LaDainian Tomlinson and had Phillip Rivers playing through a torn ACL. San Diego repeatedly moved the ball into scoring range, but New England's defense stiffened every single time, forcing 4 field goals. Meanwhile, Lawrence Maroney punished the Chargers on the ground to the tune of 122 yards, while Brady connected with Jabbar Gaffney and Welker for touchdowns. Then, clinging to a 9-point lead with 9 minutes left, the Patriots delivered a crushing 15-play drive that drained the entire rest of the clock to stamp their 18-0 record. Then, in brutal -23 wind chill at Lambeau, the Packers took a 10-6 lead thanks to a 90-yard Donald Driver touchdown. But after multiple missed kicks by Lawrence Tynes, the game spilled into overtime, where Favre threw a devastating interception on what became his final pass in a Packer uniform. Moments later, Tynes redeemed himself with a 47-yard game winner to send the Giants to the Super Bowl with a 23-20 victory. The 18-0 Patriots, owners of the most dominant season in NFL history to this point, had spent 4 months humiliating the league, demolishing almost every opponent in their path. So on paper, arriving in Arizona to play a 10-6 wildcard team, just 1 win away from the first 19-0 season ever, seemed like a formality. But week after week, the Giants kept surviving with their relentless front seven, gritty play from Eli Manning, and the growing belief that they could hang with anyone, especially after nearly upsetting New England in Week 17. Still, almost nobody expected this, because through the first 3 quarters, Super Bowl 42 had none of the offensive fireworks some predicted. After combining for 73 points in their regular season meeting, both offenses struggled badly. The Giants opened the game with an incredible 10-minute drive, the longest opening possession in Super Bowl history, but only came away with a field goal. New England answered with a short Lawrence Maroney touchdown run to take a 7-3 lead, but for most of the night, that was it. The Giants' defensive front completely changed the game. Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, and Osi Umenyiora mercilessly pressured Brady, sacking him 5 times and never allowing the Pats' offense to fully settle in. Brady had spent the entire season virtually untouched, but against New York's pass rush, every throw was uncomfortable. Still, entering the fourth quarter, New England remained ahead. Then the game jolted to life. Early in the fourth, Manning led an 80-yard drive capped by a touchdown to little-known receiver David Tyree, giving the Giants a 10-7 lead with 11 minutes remaining. But Brady answered like the 3-time champion he was. He marched the Patriots down the field, connecting repeatedly with Wes Welker before finding Moss wide open in the end zone for a go-ahead touchdown. Now, New England led 14-10 with 2:42 on the clock, and one defensive stand stood between them and perfection. Facing 3rd and 5 near midfield, Manning inexplicably escaped an almost guaranteed sack, breaking free from multiple Pats defenders before launching a desperate pass downfield. Tyree leaped, pinned the ball against his helmet, and magically held on as he crashed to the turf to complete the helmet catch, one of the greatest plays in NFL history. Moments later, Manning found Plaxico Burress wide open in the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown with 35 seconds to go. The Patriots had a shot though, with Brady even firing off 2 monster heaves to Moss on 3rd and 4th down that were deadly accurate, but just too covered. So once the ball hit the turf on 4th and 20, the greatest upset in NFL history was complete. The Giants had ended perfection, and Eli Manning was Super Bowl MVP.